welcome to the ReWatcher. I am your cult leader, Tom Bot, and I just watched Fantastic Four 2015, the notorious Fantastic Four 2015, which is affectionately or dismissively known as Fant4stic. It's a film seemingly nobody likes, but you know what you should like? This video, because man, this is an ordeal. And we're finally through all the Fantastic Four films, and why not subscribe? Because next week, hopefully, I'll be going through an easier watch with Loki as it starts on Disney+. But let's get into this film. So, before I started making videos, there was a few things where I was like, I don't think I ever need to talk about this film or this series. It feels like it's been done to death. And this was one of those films. And yet, here we are. I think, like, because there's only so much you can say about this film. Everyone knows it's, bites the big one. Everyone knows it was a bomb. Everyone knows about the trouble behind the scenes. And because of that, I was like, how do I approach this film? I'm going to just try to get my honest thoughts on it first. And then I might try to go into some of the drama. And then I'll go in, I guess, to the film itself. So, Fantastic Four, I should say. Because, yeah, right, let's talk about that. Chronicle is the first film from Josh Trank, writer, director, co-writer Fantastic Four. Max Landis wrote Chronicle. And he made this when he was very young. I believe he was the youngest director to have a #1 film at one point. I'm not sure if that's true. I might need to double check that. But for $12 million, he made a found-footage superhero film called Chronicle that made 10 times its budget. Now, Chronicle, I think, was a massive success in America. It was kind of mixed success everywhere else. I was actually a big fan of Chronicle. I kind of pushed it on a lot of people when I first came out because I thought it was really, really good. And based on the strength of that, he got this, because isn't that the way director makes small film? And of course the studios are like, make this massive film. You don't have to make it, we'll make it, but put your name on it. Which is kind of the way it is now. And from there, they gave him the keys to the Fantastic Four. And I'm going to talk a bit about the troubles behind the scenes, okay? Because I don't think you can talk about this film without it at this point. It's kind of like the same way if you talk about Justice League, you have to talk about what happened. Here, I don't think you can discuss this film removed from any of the troubles behind the scenes. So, I want to say this as well. I'm going to talk, of course, about his notorious tweet that he put out. Josh Trank put out a tweet the night before the film came out. And he said, a year ago I had a fantastic version of this and it would have received great reviews. You'll probably never see it. That's the reality though. That apparently cost the film $10 million. That's what some people said. But here's the thing. Was there ever going to be a great version of this film? Was this ever going to be Josh Trank's vision? And that's sort of the strange question about this. And you can put a lot of blame on a lot of people for this movie. Josh Trank you can put blame on. Fox you can put blame on. You can kind of... It's strange because normally in this situation, you'd say, oh, I side with the director, or, or else the director's being a diva. Here I'm like, I think they're both not good. At least that's the way it appears. So, a lot of the stories, I mean, this is a sort of a bridge version, I guess, of the troubles behind the scenes. But I could go into this for way longer, and I probably will someday. I'll probably do a video on it at some point, but this film, okay, was only made because Fox were going to lose the rights to Fantastic Four. Okay, they had 7 years to put a film in production, and 1 year after to release it, which means if you do the math, the last film came out in 2007. So the latest this film came out was 2015, which is when it came out. Which is why they couldn't delay it, couldn't really move it around. They were under the gun here to get this film made. And because of that, they hired Josh Trank, and they hired writer Jeremy Slater. And immediately, they seem to clash. And this is, again, probably evidence of what this film always was meant to be under Josh Trank, okay? He wanted not a superhero film. He did not want a superhero-y film. I mean, even when you watch Chronicle, obviously the superhero elements in it, but it sort of only has that as kind of the edges of the story. Jeremy Slater, I remember now, this was 2012 when they got hired. Avengers had just come out, and that was the template he used. He wanted this to be super heroic. He wanted this to be a big, light-hearted superhero film. Apparently his version included Mole Man, Galactus, as the Latverian dictator, and a lot of other stuff. This is not what Josh Trank wanted. He was not hired to write the script, though. And apparently there was notes going between Fox and Josh Trank that should have been shared with Jeremy Slater that never were. After 6 months, Slater walks away. And the script is immediately a mess because Josh Trank is putting in his stuff. Now, I will say this. Apparently, the broad strokes of the story and the structure, and from what I've read, this seems to be true, the structure of Slater's script seems to be pretty much what the final film is. But he says the rest of it is not his film. Now, he does get a credit, so I'm assuming some parts of it are. But anyway, Josh Trank starts putting in his input. Again, he was never hired to write the script. He was hired as a director. Then they bring on Simon Kinberg. Now, again, allegedly, Simon Kinberg, and again, this is what the rumor is, and it has been for a while. Simon Kinberg is basically a writer and a producer, and has been on all the Fox superhero films pretty much since X-Men Last Stand, I think. He wrote Dark Phoenix, he directed Dark Phoenix. But if you believe like the scuttlebutt and the rumor, he is essentially like a studio yes man. He just says like, what does the studio want? I'll make that. And he gets paid quite well for it. But he came in and started writing it as well. And the film, even before it goes in front of the cameras, there's controversy with it. Because they cast Michael B. Jordan as the Human Torch. Which is, I think, excellent casting. On paper, in a better film, he'd probably do really well. But of course, black Human Torch makes a lot of people mad. The internet, of course, is normally a beacon of hope and positivity, and not racism. Stan Lee supports this idea. Of course, eventually the studio supports this idea as well. They're okay with it. It seems like everyone is on board with Michael B. Jordan. It's the rest of the casting stuff that right away causes issues. Josh Trank says he wanted a black actress as Sue Storm, and studios, I know, we want Kate Mara. And because of that, first of all, they have to go up the story that, you know, Kate Mara is adopted by Dr. Storm, Reggie Cathy's character, and such, for it to sort of make sense. But because of that, we have a lot of tension straight away between Kate Mara and Josh Trank. He's apparently very cruel to her, very cold to her at the very least. And I think it was maybe a year after this film. It mightn't have even been a year. It was probably less than a year. Where she said basically that the experience was horrible, and that she put it down to sort of the directing style. She says, I think that speaking up is something I think we all should probably learn. I don't regret doing it at all, but do regret not having stood up for myself. I regret that for sure. Josh Trank did want Miles Teller, but it seems like, and look, I think I was maybe after this time an article came out about Miles Teller coming off like the biggest dick ever. And yeah, it seems like he was in full egotistical mode when he was on set. The rumors, and again, all this is alleged. We only hear, like, all of this is under NDAs and rumors from both sides trying to throw off the narrative. But he was pure like, I'm a movie star, I don't do this, blah, blah, blah. It's beneath me, I know, you know. To the point that him and Josh Trank apparently got pretty heated on set, nearly got into a fist fight. And again, all this was downplayed in the press until it was exploded open by Josh Trank and his tweets that kind of opened the floodgates, as it were. So straight away, we have a script that's all over the place that people can't agree on. We have actors, some of who want to be there, some who do not want to be there, and it seems like just straight away, it gets a bit crazy. The other thing we should mention, as I said, is that Trank is clearly over his head. Okay, as he admits himself later on, which we will get to. But he's not fully prepared for a big studio film. I mean, again, going from a 12 million film to this, which I think had 133 million at one point, and then it went up to 155 possibly. He's very reclusive on set. He's isolated, which leads to tensions between him and Fox. Now, again, both sides have different arguments here. Some people say that Trank is the one causing the trouble. Other people are saying that Fox is putting pressure on Trank, and because of that, he's just totally withdrawn. But he's to the point that at one point, when filming, the monitors are in a tent that only he is looking at. He barely talks to anyone, and when they're setting up, he's just in his trailer alone. It's crazy. It doesn't sound like a good working environment to be in. At the same time, Lucasfilm is like, hey, want to make Boba Fett film? And he's like, absolutely. So there's more pressure on him for that. Eventually, the rumors and this disaster means that he's fired. As much as they try to put a nice spin on it, he's fired by Lucasfilm, and his Boba Fett film never ends up happening. And yeah, again, is this all his fault? Possibly. I don't want to either vindicate him, and I don't want to like liberate him either, because Fox were very unreasonable as well, it seems. Like, he thought he was making a 2 hour, 20-minute film. Then they were like, an hour, 40 minutes. So that's not great. He was, as I said, very withdrawn on set. And seemingly, at times when Fox even tried to help him, he rejected them. So again, it's like this is just bad communication. And it manifests itself in him being a very, very destructive personality on set, both in his relationships with the cast and outside of it. Apparently, like, he caused $100,000 worth of damage to the house he was living in. Him and his 3 dogs. Yeah, that's not good. That's sort of some of the reports coming out. And again, people are saying this might be because of the studio interfering so much, and they are, because when the first cut of the film comes back, they're surprised at how morose the film is. They say it's not for the fans, and they kind of felt like this was more a sequel to Chronicle than a Fantastic Four film. And yeah, that's kind of how it feels at times. Like, this was meant to be a kind of an origin story beginning for the Fantastic Four. Like, I think that was one of the early titles, was like Fantastic Four Begins or Fantastic Four Origins, something terrible, generic, you know. But that was what it was meant to be. And at times it does kind of feel like, you know, the angsty teenagers trying to figure out superpowers, pretty much Chronicle again. And because of this, they need to do a lot of reshoots, a lot of rewrites. They need to happen very, very fast. And that causes a lot of problems for a number of reasons. First of all, Josh Trank is... like, they had to really rush this film out. Okay, they had to get it done. Okay, if they didn't get it done, they were going to lose the rights to Fantastic Four, a potential billion-dollar franchise. Okay? The thing is that they're not confident in Trank's vision anymore. And they start doing their own rewrites, their own plans for reshoots. They bring a lot of uncredited writers. They don't necessarily all go through Trank. At this point, it seems like he's basically coming up with his version of the script, and they're being ignored. And they're saying, this is the version we want to do. And it ends up to the point where they can't really decide what to do with this film. And he says, like, he seemingly checks out. He's on set, but a lot of the duties and the setup and the shots and the blocking is all being done by Simon Kinberg, and I think one of the other producers, I think, is called Hutch Parnell. And the problem with that is that violates DGA rules, Directors Guild of America. And Trank says this, and they're like, okay, here's a deal we'll make with you. You make your cut, we'll make our cut. Whichever tests better, that's the one we'll do. I'm like, okay. It becomes very clear they had no intention of ever doing Josh Trank's cut, because they were putting millions into reshoots and rewrites for the editor's version, which is Stephen Rifkin, who edited this film, and if you ask, Trank is basically the de facto director of this cut. The constant issue with this film, not just obviously the rest of them, look, the whole film is a mess. But as when we get to my review, there's a point where the whole film changes, coming into the last act. They could never get the ending right in this film. There was an ending at one point that they just weren't happy with. It was apparently, a lot of it was rewritten on the fly. They brought in Simon Kinberg and another writer to try to fix the ending. It still didn't work. They brought in Drew Goddard, apparently, uncredited, to try to fix the ending, and it still didn't work. The ending of the film was constantly rewritten, and never was really something that worked. Even in the finished film, it doesn't work. It got a lot of criticism when the actual movie was released as well, and rightly so. By the time they're trying to put this ending together as well, they're under really serious time constraints. The cast isn't really available at times, so they have to use doubles. They can get Miles Teller, so they just put him in front of a green screen, and they have a lot of focus on him as a result. It's a mess. Okay? It becomes very clear that they don't know what to do. They don't have a clear vision. They don't know what they want the Fantastic Four to be. They know they want it to be a big, successful movie and spawn a franchise, because they already have plans for a sequel. But they don't know what this film is. They haven't figured it out. It's a weird mishmash of a dark, serious, gritty Fantastic Four, something along with the Ultimate Fantastic Four from the comics, and also a superhero film, even though they kind of spent ages showing how horrible these powers kind of are. They wanted to be something more classical and consistent with the Marvel Universe, and that doesn't work, as those just are not things that are compatible. And it ends up being a total mess when it's finally released, unsurprisingly. They also apparently weren't happy with the level of humour in it. The first trailer comes out and people are saying, hey, it doesn't look very light or funny. And they apparently did comedy rewrites and shooting as well. So that's that is what it is. As I mentioned, the day before it comes out, Josh Trank puts out a tweet. Before this, he'd really kind of downplayed how bad it was. He was like, oh, it's not a big deal, you know, this is my film, and he went to Comic-Con, I think, promoting it and all that stuff. In fact, apparently even like days before the film came out, he said it was better than 99% of comic book movies ever made. Now, I don't know if he was being falsely sincere, or if he genuinely believed that until the reviews came out. He apparently inspired one cast member to write back saying, I don't think so. Which, yeah, that cast member was right, whoever it was. The reviews come out. He tweets that out. He is expected to be basically in Hollywood jail forever, and he kind of was until he made a Capone recently, which wasn't very good, apparently, which we'll get to as well. Either way, the cut of the film is massively butchered, and I don't know, is it all studio interference? There's no real major action in the film until that really terrible ending, and it seems like there was scenes planned, but Fox constantly slashed the budget and demanded rewrites and script changes and all this stuff. There's a big action scene that's in the trailer with the thing jumping out of a helicopter, not in the film. And some people have said it's because Fox slashed the budget. Apparently, as many as 3 action scenes were gotten rid of in this movie. Other people said that it was because Josh Trank just wasn't sure what he was doing and wasn't sure if he wanted it in the film, and eventually decided it didn't work, so he took it out. But either way, the film is a mess because of all that backstage drama. I mean, half this video is dedicated to this backstage drama, so I'm going to have to put a time code if you want to just hear me talk about the film, I guess, which I'm going to talk about now, so it's a bit late to say there's a time code now. But anyway, look, there's some things the film does well. There's some things the film does terribly. It's not a good film. Okay, let me say that. And that's not blowing anyone's mind, like Doctor Doom does later on, blowing up people's heads. It's at least a film I can sort of have a strange admiration for. Look, what I hate most is a film that is just, you know, uninspired, doesn't try anything. Okay? This film is a big swing. Now, I think it's mostly it's a miss, as much as it's a big swing. But there's some interesting ideas here. It's a baffling decision that they made to do a Cronenberg body horror film with the Fantastic Four, the cheesiest of the Marvel heroes. I kind of have to admire the balls, but also I don't think it was that they were being ballsy. I think it was just that they had no idea what to do. And then when they did get it, they were like, this is weird, we don't want it, what? So yeah, I blame Fox in that regard. But also, I don't think Josh Trank's vision was fully realised either, as far as what he wanted to do. But let's get into it. This is started in such a strange way. We start young. We start with Fantastic Four as kids. Ben Grimm and Reed Richards are in the same class. And Dan Castellaneta is there as Homer Simpson, the teacher. He's a total dick. Like, the kid is like, hey, I'm going to make a teleporter. And, you know, and straight away he's like, you can't do that, you moron. You're a fool, Reed. What are you doing? Sit down. What are you going to make a flying car? Ooh. Yeah, that's a comic reference for the Fantastic Car. And if you were hoping that, that might pay off in some way, like him getting the car and being like, hey, I told you I could do the flying car, teacher, you idiot. I'm out to another dimension. No, it doesn't pay off. The Fantastic Car was actually cut from this film. This is how we kind of meet Ben Grimm and Reed Richards. Reed is making this portal to another dimension. Now, I hear you saying, oh, the negative zone. No, it's called Planet Zero, because I guess they figured the negative zone was too silly a name, but Planet Zero, that generic ass shit, was good. Yeah, why is it not the negative zone? I have no idea. Either way, he's making a portal to a different dimension. And, like, what's really strange is that the way they get Ben Grimm and Reed Richards to me is like, Grimm's family owns a scrapyard, and Reed raises to sell steel batteries, and that's how they become friends, by working on this dimension hopping machine. And now if you're like, oh, hey, you know, some parts of this are kind of comic book, I recognize them. Well, you might recognize it's clobbering time. And it's about to be ruined by you forever, because in this film, it's clobbering time is, well, it comes from Ben Grimm's older brother, who beats him up. He says it's clobbering time. Wow, that's dark. And pointless, and just feels like it's trying to be edgy. Oh man, that's kind of a downer. But anyway, I guess they were sort of faithful to the comics. If you're thinking, where's the levity in this film? Tim Heidecker's in it. For some reason, for 2 minutes as Ben Grimm's dad. Or Reed's dad. For no real reason. And that's it for him. I have no idea why he's in this film. I don't know what his connection is. But either way, he's here. for no reason and no source of comedy from Tim and Eric. But either way, the rest of the film, you're like, hey, well, if it's not comedic, maybe it could be cinematic. Nope. First of all, I'm going to talk about this a couple of times, I'm sure. Visually, the effects are fine, but the color palette of this movie is so dull. It's just so washed out and boring. Everything, like the Baxter Building, which they get into, is just silver and metallic colors, cold colors. Everything is just washed out and boring. It's just it's like they want to make it really grounded and gritty, but it's so boring looking that it feels like a manufactured effect. But as another thing they could have done cinematically here is they finally get access to a dimension, and you're like, oh, what's something cool or interesting that could come from another space dimension? Rock. A rock comes through. Wow, very cinematic and entertaining. Whoa. Did you see the new Fantastic Four film? The Fantastic Four got a rock from another dimension. Wow. Oh, man. So, yeah. Then we get a time jump, one of two in this film. We jump forward 7 years. And this is something also I want to mention. I have no idea what age these characters are meant to be. Like, genuinely no idea. Because we start with him as a kid. We jump forward 7 years. I thought he was quite young as a kid. Now he's seemingly in the same school. Because Dan Castellaneta is still his teacher. Because he's at a science fair now 7 years later. But there's also kids that are way younger than him. And also now it's played by Miles Teller. Reed Richards is. And Jamie Bell is playing Ben Grimm. They're grown up. And they look just weird hanging around in a school. Like, there's kids that are way younger than him here. I don't know what age they're meant to be, but it doesn't look believable, whatever's going on. But either way, we get Miles Teller's punchable face. And in the science fair, he gets his dimension machine to work, and Dan Castellaneta is like, that's not science, it's magic, you fool! And he's like, you're disqualified. But someone who's a bit more impressed is Dr. Storm, played by Reggie Cathy, and his daughter, who's in tow, Sue Storm, played by Kate Mara. And they're like, oh, well done, Reed. You know, hey, you should come to the Baxter Foundation. That's where we take young scientists and turn them into tools for the government, seemingly. It seems kind of shady, to be honest. And he's like, oh, awesome. Hey, Ben Grimm, I don't need you anymore. Bye. And he goes to the Baxter Building, which they treat as a big deal. But like in the reality of the movie, it's just a building that says Baxter, so I don't know why they're impressed. But it's, I guess, the big deal for the comic readers, kind of. But yeah, that's how we get into the Baxter Building. That's how Sue Storm and Reed Richards meet. And if you're hoping this to be cool or have good chemistry, no, they have the chemistry of newspaper and a bucket of water. Really, it's like they just don't interact very well at all. They seemingly are very uncomfortable around each other. I had heard that Josh Trank apparently micromanages so many of the performers to be like, do this, say it like this, and have this mannerism, to the point that it just sapped all energy out of them, and it was really flat performance. I'm not going to look. I will say every actor I've seen in this film has done better performance. Like, but they have no chemistry. There's one part where there's like a joke. I think it's meant to be a joke because they laugh and it's awkward. Maybe it's meant to be awkward flirting, but it's terrible.
Where were you born?
Kosovo.
Kosovo. You don't have an accent.
I don't.
I don't know. Yeah, it's not funny. Anyway, this film is just awkward, angsty teenagers for half of it. I don't know if they're teenagers, but they're certainly awkward and they're certainly angsty, and I'm not sure if it's a deliberate thing to make them awkward. But anyway, I mean, they're cool hipster people, and they remind you of that because she's listening to Portishead. Whoa, you're so hip, Sue Storm. Anyway, do you know who's also in the film? Because we need something comic booky. Victor Von Doom, or Victor Domashev, as he was supposed to be called. But then they were like, oh god, no, we need something comic booky, and they're making Doctor Doom very clearly. Because anytime they say Doctor Doom, it's like awkwardly off like scene. They're like, oh, it's Victor Doom. You know, it's Doctor Doom, Victor Von Doom. Like, they change his name apparently, so sometimes it's ADR, it seems like. Other times it's characters off screen calling him that. Which is really weird. Because apparently he was going to be called Victor Domashev. He was going to be a blogger who blogs under the name Doom. Which is terrible. Which makes, you know, when you hear something like that, you're like, Trank's version would not have probably been that much better. And yeah, he's not, you know, a dictator of Latveria. He is a computer programmer who's socially awkward. He left, or was fired from the, oh no, I think he left the Baxter Foundation, but he was working on the same thing Reed was working on. He left before it was finished. So now he comes back and he's like, oh, you know, oh, he's working on the same thing I am. You should come back and see, because this guy's got it to work. But he also has a hot for Sue. I should say that. He's like, is Sue going to be there? So he ends up there as well. I don't know why they keep doing love triangles between Victor Von Doom and Sue Storm and Reed Richards, and they never really use it aside from just setting it up, and that's kind of the case here as well. Yeah, can I talk about how Doctor Doom gets his name in the most ham-fisted, awkward way? They do a lot of ham-fisting things here, especially towards the end, but this literally makes no sense. Okay, so there's a scene and he's being a downer, and Sue Storm says,
Dr. Doom over here.
Dr. Doom over here.
That doesn't make any sense. Because, like, that's not a thing. That's not a thing people say. No one's like, oh, this Dr. Doom over here. You only say that if you're deliberately referencing the comics and the character, which isn't a thing in this universe. So then I was trying to, like, I was literally, like, my head was in knots trying to figure this out. I'm like, okay, well, is he a doctor? In which case, you're like, oh, Dr. Doom over here. But then the what she's saying doesn't make sense. And then it's like, well, okay, but what does Doctor Doom mean? Does it mean something else in this universe? I mean, she doesn't have to call him Doctor Doom if he's a doctor, because then it's just redundant. What is going on? They just really had to be like, hey, it's Doctor Doom, you dummies. See, he is in this film, even though it's nothing like the character. And that's not the only thing they do. They do some really obvious ham-fisted ways to remind you that Johnny Storm is in fact a Human Torch, because Michael B. Jordan is introduced. He's a street car racer, and yeah, just to be like, hey, you know, he's the fire guy because his car blows up and catches fire. Get it? Because like it's like poetry, so it rhymes.
It's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
They also do really awkward things later on to be like, hey, he's the fire guy, right? Like they immediately give him a welding torch, and they put flames on his mask for his welding. I don't know why they do it, but yeah, he crashes his car and like damages his arm. So his dad, Dr. Storm, is like, you can come to the Baxter building and pay off your debt and blah. So there we go. He's forced into this, isn't he? And, you know, their experiments are going pretty well. It's working, man. It's working. And because of that, they're like, hey, we like what you're doing here. We're going to send the army into this dimension. I'm like, oh, right. That seems like a kind of crappy. And they don't want it. Now, I should mention two of the other characters in this film. I mentioned Reggie Cathy as Dr. Storm. You know, I think he's actually one of the better performances in the film. He's a totally unnecessary character. I feel like they just put him in because they were like, if these kids are meant to be young, like they're too young to be running around making their own decisions. We need a grown up, and Reggie Cathy looks old enough to be a grown up. So he's there, I guess. We have Tim Blake Nelson, whose inclusion is very odd. I feel so bad for Tim Blake Nelson. Like he was going to be the leader in a sequel to The Incredible Hulk, which never happened. He was, you know, in this film going to be the Mole Man. He was originally named, Harvey Allen. No, he was named Harvey Elder in the comics. The Mole Man is called Harvey Elder in the comics. And they changed that to Harvey Allen, because I think at some point they were like, this is nothing like the Mole Man. What if we waste the Mole Man in this film? It doesn't make him kind of like the Mole Man. So it's terrible. They kill him off anyway. Poor Tim Blake Nelson, he's wasted here as well. So yeah. If you need any further indication that this is inspired by The Fly, it gets really obvious really quick. Apparently they also use scanners as a reference. I haven't seen scanners. I know obviously there's that scene where the head blows up. Which, yeah, there's a lot of head blowing up. Maybe is that why people use scanners? I don't know. I need to watch scanners. But it's very much like The Fly. And I mentioned this when I talked about the 2005 film, because they had those pods that look like the pods from The Fly. Here, it could be even more obvious, because just like Jeff Goldblum in The Fly, when he gets drunk and just jumps in the machine, that's what they do. Doom, Johnny Storm, Reed Richards get drunk and they're like, let's go into another dimension. Not exactly like that, but not far off. Ben Grimm, they're just like basically Reed like booty calls, not drunk calls, drunk dials him, and he's like, oh, you know, Ben, come to the dimension, man, for no real reason. Sue Storm is smart enough to stay out of it, but it doesn't matter because she's going to get involved anyway. I feel like this is a missed opportunity. I feel like this could have been because look, I don't think I'm spoiling anything to say this is how they get their powers. I think you could have put Sue in the pod. She could have followed because she was like falling for Reed, and then, you know, there's that kind of drama there. And Doom can be the smarter, the older guy with more experiences. Like, we shouldn't do this. This is irresponsible, blah. Because that would be kind of a Doom thing. Doom is not really like this fun, spontaneous guy, really. And they go anyway against his wishes, and as a result, he ends up getting blasted and becoming what's the word? You know, he becomes Doctor Doom. He becomes misshapen. I'm just going to write down in the video what word I'm trying to say. because I can't remember the word right now. And then you would have had a bit more friction between Reed and Doom as well. And also, Doom would have kind of had the moral high ground, which would have been interesting. But no, they all go to the dimension, everyone except Sue. And wouldn't you know it, once they get to this dimension, this horrible, like, jagged rock volcano mountain dimension, which is so boring visually. It, like, they also they made it worse as well. Like, the trailers, it wasn't anything original, but it looked kind of cool, where it was just like basically a lava kind of thing, which, nothing new. But now they just made it glowy green, which seems like overkill. It just looks stupid. It just reeks of kind of like put some special effects in. Not very good. And yeah, as soon as they get to this nightmare dimension, straight away they're like, "Put down the US flag, USA, USA. We claim this dimension for the United States of America." It's like, what? That seems like very out of place in the film. But anyway, that's what Ben Grimm does. And as soon as they get here, they become morons. They obviously went to the Prometheus school of being a scientist, where they're like, "Hey, we don't need logic now. We're in another dimension." Like, Doom just runs up and throws his hand into a load of green goo. And the goo is like, "What's going on?" And the goo explodes. So they have to run away from the goo. Doom falls into the goo. Dr. Doom, sorry. They manage to escape into the pods while the planet is exploding. And this is something where I'm like, hey, they had an idea here, but again, it's not fully formed. And that kind of sums up the movie. Because one thing I talked about in all of these videos I've done, I think, is that, like, why does the Fantastic Four get those powers? Like, why is he on fire? Why is he stretching? And I like the best explanation I've come to, and the one I was talking about a lot, is elemental. Fire, water, earth, air. This time they like try to explain it. So, like, the Thing gets in his pod and a load of rocks are thrown in. So I guess he merges with the rocks. And Johnny catches fire. I don't remember how he catches fire, but you're like, oh, he merged with the fire. I don't know what happened with Reed, that he ended up stretchy. And I definitely don't know what happened that Sue got a blast of something when they came through back into the Baxter building and ends up being invisible air. I don't know, she got a blast of air and now she can disappear. I don't know. But yeah, that's how our Fantastic Four get their powers. And of course, Doom is now stranded on Planet Zero, covered in goo, seemingly dead. But of course, he's not. And this is where we probably get, I want to say, the strongest scene in the film. But also, it's not in fitting with the rest of the film. And also, it's kind of like the pitch for what this film wanted to be. It's what the buzzword, because everyone's like, oh, it's a Cronenberg body horror. And it is, sort of, in times. But only for a couple of scenes. And it feels like not a fully fleshed out idea. To be honest, this scene kind of reminded me of, like, is it like, what's the guy's name? Ari Shankar? I think the guy's name is. He did those bootleg fan films. Like, he did one for The Punisher. He did one for Venom. He did one for Power Rangers, where, like, they basically do, like, gritty reboots of properties they'd never really be able to do as fan films with established IP. And here, it's like, it kind of feels like that for the Fantastic Four, because it's so gritty and over the top, where, like, he wakes up and, like, it's just a nightmare. Everyone's suffering and he's, like, horribly stretched out, and it's, like, terrifying. You're like, whoa. And it's this point where I was like, man, this is the Fantastic Four. This cheesy, like, flame on, it's slobbering time. That cheesy shit. They were like, yeah, let's use that as a horror film, and the horrors of not being able to control your own body. I'm like, what the hell? That was really crazy. I also was like, man, there's no way any kid could enjoy this, because most of this film, I'll be honest, is just pretty boring. And this is terrifying if you're a kid. Not great. So I don't know who this is meant to satisfy. It's not Cronenberg enough for Cronenberg fans. It's boring for most superhero fans. And terrifying for kids, or boring. Either way, not great for anyone, really. But yeah, that's kind of like probably the pitch, the strongest pitch for the film itself, I guess. That, it's the body horror, and that's the scene that did it. And this is also around the time where the film changes completely, and noticeably so. So, like, we have the scenes of them waking up with their powers. Johnny's on fire, and he's like, "Oh, I'm on fire! I'm burning!" We're like, "Oh, horrible," kind of stuff. Reed, his limbs are all stretched out, which is one thing is really funny. I thought, like, they like tie him up, but they put like just one strap around his arm with his stretched out arm. So he just unstretches his arm and gets him. Like, well, that was your restraint. Well done. And he sees like the Thing covered in rocks, and he's just like basically screaming like, "Reed!" And you're like, "What the fuck?" And Reed just nopes out of there. He just runs away. By the way, can I just say this? I hate Reed Richards in this film. He's so horrible. He's the worst. He's the worst in this film. He's awful. He runs away. And then we cut to a year later. Apparently, in one version of the script, this was going to be 7 years later. Wow, imagine that. 7 years They would have taken a jump here. But in general, this is where it seems like it feels like this is where any vision the film did have is completely gone. I think I don't know, is this confirmed? It certainly seems what everyone suggests. This is basically where Josh Trank's film ends and the rest is like studio, mangled, messed up. Frankenstein going, hey, look at I'm wearing a Frankenstein shirt. Total coincidence. That means nothing if you're listening to the audio version. You just heard a creaky chair as I stood up and showed the camera on my t-shirt, but there you go. Anyway, it's alive. So this is what we have here. We have kind of 2/3 of one film and 1/3 of a different film in a weird way. So in this year gap, a lot has sort of happened. Okay? Seemingly this is a lot of reshoot stuff. I don't think all of it is, but certainly massive chunks of it. Certainly I would imagine parts would seem pretty consistent with Josh Trank's vision itself anyway. But the thing is now working for the government, the military. He seemingly killed like 40-something people. Like, wow, yeah, that's great. Buy a toy of the thing, kids. He killed a lot of people. And he's working for the government. Johnny is training to start doing missions for the government. They don't seem to have much of a relationship in general, to be honest. Sue, we also see her doing her powers. And that's the thing, like, it just jumps to them being like, just put a lot of scenes of them using their powers. And it's not like the effects are terrible or anything. Like, the effects are actually pretty good. I would say, like, the Thing looks probably better than he's ever looked. He's this weird, jagged CGI thing. The Thing should always be CGI going forward, in my opinion. As much as there's kind of a kitschy appeal of the suit, the CGI looks better. Although his face looks a little weird. I don't know about his eyes. But anyway, I mean, the stretchy thing is fine. Pretty good. Probably better than it hasn't been in the other films. The Human Torch, I think he looks a bit creepy. Like his face especially. He has like these weird, like, empty eyes. But not terrible. It looks okay. I mean, it could be a bit more visually interesting. But anyway, I actually do think I might have preferred the last film's Human Torch effects. But anyway, Kate Mara is like... one thing I thought was stupid about Kate Mara's powers, they're like a bit too showy. And obviously they want this to be kind of cool and unseen, but like they should be subtle. You know, she's invisible, and meanwhile she's like all these big purpley blue balloons and stuff, and you're like, whoa, come on, like that's very visible. The other effects, I mean, Doctor Doom, we'll get to him soon enough, but yeah, so the effects aren't terrible, you know, but it is weird that we just get all these scenes of them using their powers kind of seemingly out of nowhere to just be like, oh, we need some Fantastic Four hero stuff, come on, and that's basically what this is. It's like them, like, just put in some scenes with some superhero stuff because people are falling asleep. Wake them up. So Reed is on the run in South America like some sort of Nazi. So he's like, oh, I was so bad for what I did for the Thing. And so again, I hate Reed. Hate him. He does do something I mentioned last week, which you can do in the comics, which is I'm like, why don't they use this more? Where he's like stretches his face into someone else. And then I saw the effect and it was terrifying. I was like, you know what? Don't do it more. We're good. Don't do it again. We briefly get a sort of action scene that's kind of interesting where he's fighting guys with a stretchy bars. I'm like, hey, that was almost interesting. And then the Thing drops in and I'm like, oh, we're going to get the Thing and Reed fighting. Finally, the movie's going to do something interesting. And no, it avoids that. Thank God, that nearly got exciting for a second. So, yeah, then of course they're just sitting around moping like most of the film is. Them just sitting around. At this point, I wrote down teenage moping genius heroes. I don't know, is that anything? But it certainly sums up the movie. I mean, I don't know, are they meant to be... I think they're meant to be teenagers. They're certainly moping. They don't come off like geniuses, and they don't come off like heroes. So, I don't know. Not maybe just the moping part, but definitely that. This is, again, when they're like, hey, we need an ending now. Because I think there's like 20 minutes left in the film at this point. So they send the army into Planet Zero. Ugh, I hate that name. And Doom is there. You thought he was dead. No, we didn't. But anyway, he somehow found a cloak on this weird dimension, by the way. That turns out is not just glowy green stuff. There's also some green fabric knocking about. Doom's design is terrible. It is horrible to look at. It looks like he's covered in tinfoil with some glowy things. I mean, they totally killed any screen presence he could have as well. Like, Doom is meant to be this like cool, intimidating character. Like, oh, I am Doom, you know. He doesn't really move around. You can't even see like his mouth never moves. He's just very rigid. Basically, what happens is his suit is melted to him, or like, I don't know, they merged. Which again, in theory, that could have been interesting, but it looks like shit. The effect is just not good. Very dull design. I understand what they were going for, but it's not well executed either. And look, even if this wasn't Doom, if this is meant to be another character, any character, a new character even, It's just a very bland, boring design. Okay. I know at some point in one version of the script, it was going to be that he was a kind of a herald for Galactus, so basically he would be the Silver Surfer, which makes a little bit more sense, but still not a good design. I heard at one point he was going to be a Doom bot. Again, why? Again, it doesn't sound like this film ever could have been fantastic when you hear also some of this stuff, pun intended. But anyway, that's when he comes back to Earth, and this is one of the cool moments in the film where he's literally just going around exploding people's heads, and I'm like, holy crap, kids aren't going to like this. I'm like, this is really cool. And then he kills Tim Blake Nelson, by the way. He also kills Reggie Cathy. So there goes the grown-up in the movie. I guess he then just forgets he can do that. He forgets he can explode things, I think. So, yeah. He goes back to his... I don't know why he's just like, oh, I don't need this Earth. I'm going into this dimension. I'm going to destroy Earth. Because apparently he's like a thing that's going to turn the Earth into a black hole or something. I don't know. Who cares? And the Fantastic Four are like, we need to stop him. But, we get some cool things here where Sue is like flying with the rest of the Fantastic Four in a bubble, and the Human Torch is flying alongside him. Like, that's very comic booky and clearly not fitting with the rest of the movie at all. So they go into the dimension and they fight him. Now, I have very few notes about the ending, to be honest, for the fight, because it just was really, really boring. It's, you thought we were done with sky beams, but 2015, Fox hadn't got the memo yet because, man, they got a big blue sky beam. And we got a weird Ghostbusters reference. I referenced Ghostbusters when I was talking about the 2005 one. This time they're a bit more deliberate when he turns around and literally says,
"There is no victor. There is only doom."
What, as in there is no Dana, only Zool from Ghostbusters? What is that about?
There is no Dana. There is only Zool.
It's just a very strange thing to put in there, especially in a series. Like, was that like the comedy beat? not very funny. Not very good. There's like a big fight scene. They use some of their powers here. Sue can turn other things invisible. That's kind of cool. And then I can't even... Like, they end up getting Doom, like, I don't know, does he go into a sky beam or something and gets dissolved? I don't care. I've tuned out at this point. It wasn't very interesting either way.
It's clobbering time!
And the Fantastic Four win. They go back through the portal, and there's just a massive, massive, massive crater that they destroyed. And they kind of stand there looking proud. I'm like, look what you've done. Like, this is all your fault. Like, you put people in this dimension. If you had just not gotten drugged, this might have gone a bit better. And that's I won't say that's the end, because we still have two very ham-fisted things that I think they threw in for like comic lore. But they beat it. It's a pretty underwhelming team shot. The whole ending is underwhelming. They move. Oh no, sorry. First they threaten the government. Remember when Superman like goes through a satellite and he's like, oh, I'll do my own thing, General. And you're like, that's cool, but also you're like, oh, Superman could go crazy anytime and kill everyone. Like they're like, oh, you have to answer for this and do this, and they're like, we don't answer to anyone. We don't operate without oversight. And they're like, what are you going to do? And they're like, and thing is like, so it's like, oh, okay. So like, in other words, if the government tries to stop you from creating another massive hole or going to another dimension and causing a possibly world-ending catastrophe, you beat them up. Brilliant. Well done. Our heroes, ladies and gentlemen.
And what if we say no?
Say yes.
And they end up being relocated to Central City. I think that was their first base in the comics. I mean, Central City normally reminds me of the Flash anyway. But yeah, I don't know why they didn't just put them in the Baxter Building, but I guess they kind of shot their water with that one by having the Baxter Building in it early. Either way, that's sort of the end of the film, except we get two really ham-fisted things. Remember how I've said throughout this that one of the things I love that works is the Human Torch and Thing dynamic. There's none of that in this film until the very end. Someone was like, we have to put that in the film. We have to show that we know comics, because this is for comic book fans. This weird body horror film. And it really just made me go, whoa, man. At one point, like at the very end, everything's good. And the Human Torch just goes,
how about two guys, a girl, and the thing that nobody wanted?
Out of nowhere. And you're like, whoa, man, settle down. That's what I'm called for. A bit harsh, like. Like, that was really weird. Out of nowhere. He was mean. I was like, man, Johnny Storm, that was just uncalled for, sir. Now, on the plus side, we're like, we haven't got a name yet. What are we going to call ourselves? And they look around, they're like, what do you think of this place? And he goes,
Gotta say, it's fantastic.
Say that again?
Wow, you never would have come up with the name Fantastic. That's really ham-fisted. Thank God. Now they're called Fantastic Four. We get the awkward title, the Fantastic Four, where the 4 is the A. Hence Fantastic Four, or Fant4stic, as people have come to know it. Well, that's my review. I'll go into my thoughts in a minute, but you know what? Let's hear from a different perspective. Let's hear the review of the director himself, sort of. the sometimes director of Fantastic. The sometimes director of Fantastic Four, Josh Trank, ladies and gentlemen. He gave the film 2 stars in a letterbox review he posted in November 2019, saying the movie is alright. He actually thought it was better than he remembered. He saw it, I think he said, like 2 weeks after it came out, but he was like totally off his rocker at that point. I can't remember his actual phrase. He was heavily traumatized, was what I said, not off his rocker. He said he expected it to be worse than it was. He gives props to the cast and says there is a movie in there somewhere and they deserve to be in that movie, and clearly thought they were making that movie. And he says there are 2 different movies in there competing to be that movie. Frankenstein cut, eh? Again, he then says something that I think is very true of the production of this and the final results. I was 29 years old, making my second film in a situation more complicated than anything, a second-time filmmaker should have walked into. That said, I don't regret any of it. It's part of me. Like I said, he was out of his depth. He was under a lot of pressure. I don't think that defends his actions. It sounds like he wasn't very good to deal with, for whatever reason. The studio put a lot of pressure on him as well. And it felt like just they fucked up on both sides. And that's what we ended up with. Fantastic Four. To date, the last cinematic adaptation of Fantastic Four. Of course, they're going to be rebooting the MCU in a couple of years from director John Watts. So what do I think of this film? And what do I think of the series as a whole, I suppose? Well, let me say this, right? I appreciate a big swing, even if it's a miss, okay? And I think this is mostly a miss, to be fair. But being like, let's make a body horror film of the Fantastic Four, let's make it dark and gritty. I'm like, I don't think that's a good approach, but I gotta at least be like, hey, they had some bit of an idea. They had something new and something different, even if it didn't work and was probably a bad idea. I'm like, hey, they tried something. Now, it's awful. It's not a good film. I don't think it's as bad as everyone says. I'll give it that much. For me, I was mostly bored. I was bored, mildly interested, and then bored again. Then we got to the ending. The ending I just thought was dull as much as it tried to be interesting. I think the cast could do a lot better of a job. No one did them justice here, including Marvel Comics, by the way. Marvel Comics literally killed off the actor, not the Fantastic Four. They killed off the actors from the Fantastic Four. Like, wow, that's petty. Oh, man. But yeah, that's the 2015 Fantastic Four. It's not good. It's kind of interesting when you know the story behind it, but I think it's only interesting in that regard. It's really obvious where the reshoots are, because Kate Mara is wearing a terrible, terrible wig that is in some shots and then not in other shots, so it's like really weirdly mixed together. And also, I think Miles Teller sometimes he has facial hair, sometimes he doesn't. It goes back and forth as well. It's just terrible in that regard. But, you know, is it the best Fantastic Four film? No. And that brings me to the question of what is the best Fantastic Four film? And, it's kind of weird because, like, I think probably the best Fantastic Four film is Rise of the Silver Surfer, but it's like barely better. And I want to give a shout out to the Roger Corman one. The Roger Corman film, like, if it was properly released, and if they kind of gave it a bit of money and properly got behind it, like, that film has heart, and I feel like they actually care. They tried to do as best as they could, and I don't get that from any of these other films. I feel like if they had like the time and the budget and they released it properly and did it the justice it deserves, at least releasing the film, I think that could have been like a sort of a fun film. But regardless, none of these films are very good or very entertaining. I will probably never watch them ever again unless I really, really have to. And that is it for the rewatcher as I've dived into these Fantastic Four films throughout May. I could have taken May off. I kind of wish I had. But, you know, that's where we leave it. I'm taking a week off. I think Loki airs June 9th, which is a Wednesday. Hopefully I will have an episode of our regularly scheduled programming, The Watcher, back either the day it comes out or, you know, a day or two after, going through the episode, breaking it down. But aside from that, let me know what you want me to watch. Because, of course, there's going to be gaps where I have nothing to watch. What do you want me to dive back into? Is it a comic book thing? Is it some other nerdy property that needs to be back under the microscope and reevaluated? Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. I'm sure, I get the feeling this is going to develop into just the bad stuff, really. But, hey, how bad? Very bad, actually, if Fantastic Four films are anything to go about. But either way, I hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe, and come back when we're doing Loki, June 9th or around then. Just subscribe and you won't miss out. Either way, thank you for watching this video, and please come back, because remember, I'll be watching. Take care.